In the mid-90s to the early 2000s, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, she was out there. She was kicking butt. She was showing that young girls can save the world just as well as men. And she was showing young men why a feisty blonde is definitely wife material. Like a great many other fans of the series, I was very upset when it ended. I wasn't ready. I wanted more. Now, yes, the series did continue in comic book form, but there is another form of media, and I've collected them all. I'm talking video games. There are 5 in total, 2 home console, 3 handheld. I've managed to finally complete my Buffy the Vampire Slayer game collection. I'm going to show you all the games. We're going to begin with the home console games, so let's kick off. And we're going to begin with 2000's original Xbox exclusive Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Spike is back, and he's decided to try and awaken and summon some ancient big bads. Fortunately, the full Scooby Gang is present, willing and able to help Buffy in her fight against evil, including Angel. This is set when Buffy was still in high school. However, Willow is using witchcraft, so my best guess would be it's at some point in Season 3 before the finale. As you would expect, it plays as a 3D beat-em-up, with some ingenuitively trippy levels. The reason for it in the game is there are these baddies called Dreamers, and they have the ability to alter either reality itself or your perception of reality. I'm not 100% sure which way that goes actually. Combat is done through a variety of kicks, blocks, punches, and a combination of them all. You also have access to weapons. You've got the trusty wooden stake of vampires' worst nightmare, as well as improvised weapons such as random shovels laying around, and the crossbow, which is actually really good fun. They also introduced into this a mechanic called the Slayer Power Bar. What this basically does is allow you to give more powerful attacks. However, because it's a power bar, it does deplete with use, so it is worth saving it and timing it for those tougher big bads. Although, of course, you can recharge it. The way done here is simply by vanquishing enemies, which is quite handy because there's a good amount of them actually. Let's be honest, if there weren't, the game would be dull. To encourage you to explore each level, you can find secrets. These are usually in the form of either crystals or potions. They are useful, so it is worth finding them, and I quite enjoyed exploring the levels anyway, this computer-rendered, trippy version of locations in Sunnydale. One thing I'm not sure about is if it's the original cast lending their voices to the game. I do know Sarah Michelle Gellar is not voicing Buffy, she declined. However, whether the rest of the Scooby Gang are the original voice cast or not, no clue. If you know, let me know, because I'd be interested to get an answer. Next we come to the first and indeed only multi-platform Buffy game, Buffy the Vampire Slayer Chaos Bleeds. Released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2, the GameCube and the original Xbox. Also in this game, as well as controlling Buffy as you'd expect to, you do get to control some of the other characters, which I think's a nice touch. The story is set during the 5th season with all the Scoobies, but no Dawn, thankfully. Not everybody's favourite character, I know. And we find ourselves battling a variety of baddies as they are intent on bringing the first evil back to Earth. Due to the summoning efforts of the big bads, realities are bleeding into each other, hence the title, Chaos Bleeds. And this is bringing back past characters, both good and bad, which does mean that this game is a real good fan service, and I do believe it is throughout actually, but we'll get into that a bit more in a second. Obviously, with the storyline of the first evil, and considering that was a storyline in the final season of the TV show, I wonder if the writers are connected. Let me know if you know, but I digress. Combat is as you would expect it to be, punching, kicking, blocking with combos, and of course the expected Slayer weapons. The wooden stake's always a trusted ally, is it not? However, when you play with Willow, that is actually a real highlight of the game. She uses spells, as you would expect if you're a fan of the show, and it just adds a completely different dimension to the game, and it is one of my favourite parts of the entire run-through. All the other characters have very similar beat-em-up mechanics to Buffy, but they do manage to have some subtle differences. And can I just say, Sid the Dummy is a real bit of humour in there. It is just funny, as he's half the size of everything else. It's only a small section, but it just brightens it all up, because obviously the show did have humour in it, so it's only right the game has some as well. As well as the standard navigating around, taking out demons and vampires and everything else that's thrown at you, there are some light environmental puzzles, such as finding key cards, hitting switches in the right combination. They're only light puzzle elements, they keep it interesting, but they don't stop you going forward, thankfully. And there's also some light platforming. Of all the Buffy games, this is probably my favourite story of the games, and a book was actually released based on this game's plot, with the same title, and it's just flushed out that little bit more. All in all, if you're going to play a Buffy game on the console, they're both great, but I think this one's just slightly better than the Xbox exclusive, probably because it was made 3 years later. It just plays a little bit more smoothly, and it's just great fun.
Are you around here? You are aware that Slayer is screaming death, right?
So they're the two home console games. I think Chaos Bleeds is just about my favourite, but honestly, they're both really good fun. Highly recommended by me. But of course, I did say there are 3 handheld games, and I love handhelds. So, let's begin. We're going to do it in reverse order. You'll see why towards the end. We're going to kick off with the Nintendo DS. The Nintendo DS exclusive from 2009, Buffy The Vampire Slayer Sacrifice, and the most expensive Buffy game in my collection. This is set after the television series ended. In fact, it's more or less immediately after the television series ended. And there are 2 gameplay modes. The first is the one you can see, which is very much 3D beat-em-up-esque. It's got the fixed camera angle. Remember, this is a full 3D game on a Nintendo DS, and I think it really does well, given the limitations of the hardware. You control Buffy, as you can see, on the bottom screen with a map and information on the top. It's the standard array of punches, kicks, blocks and combos. I will say, combat-wise, is not easy actually. It's not easy at all. If you don't know how to use the block, or you try to rush through an encounter by not using it, you could very easily die. You have to use the weapons, use your combos, as I said, use that block button, and you do have access to spells as well. The game explains this by saying that Willow is imbuing you with the powers. You use the touchscreen, different swipes in different directions, do different spells. I think you saw me earlier use a bit of a lightning blast. You can also use a healing one, which is very useful. Spells to unlock magically restricted areas and the like. You also get a variety of weapons which you can access from your inventory. So you can see you've got things like bats, the crossbow, knives, stakes, etc. You can also access a menu that lets you be reminded of the spells you've got available to you and how to cast them, and a list of combos as well, because it's a decent system with a decent bit of variety, and trying to remember everything could get a little bit trying. The story is told between levels or during levels sometimes, like this, where you get the image then with some text underneath. And there's always plenty to collect, either by defeating enemies or smashing boxes, as per standard video game rules. Decent variety of locations. You've got your standard things like graveyards,
You're in the school at the moment, which has been decimated after the series finale, so they've kept it canon as well. And yes, you will see appearances from characters from the show, but I don't want to spoil the plot for you. What I do want to show you is what we're in now, actually, which is the other aspect of the gameplay, where it turns into an FPS with a crossbow. Standard DS controls for a first-person game. Use the stylus on the touchscreen to aim, the D-pad to move around, and the left trigger to shoot. You can change it around to buttons to move around and right trigger to shoot if you're left-handed, of course. And it works. It takes some getting used to, but it does genuinely work. I'm not doing a particularly good job of it here because I'm trying to keep the DS flat and not moving to capture the footage for you. I think, for a DS game, it looks bloody good. But you have to let me know what you think. As well as using the crossbow, if they get close, you can give them a bit of a bash with it, as you might have just seen me do there. You can also access spells, however, whereas when you're in the third-person mode, you just swipe on the screen. With this, you have to change it to hands only from crossbow, and then hold the fire button, so you're activating your hands, and then do the gesture. It's a bit of a pain, so I didn't tend to use the spells, I just stuck to blasting them with crossbow bolts. They tend to use this mode more for the bosses and the end of the level. It works, it gets a bit of getting used to with the controls, as I've already said, but it really does work well. I like the fact there's two aspects to the game. I think they definitely pushed the hardware as hard as they could. You've got to remember, this is a licensed game, and it's far from just a cash grab, at least in my opinion. It's actually one of the most impressive DS games, or at least one of the most fun DS games that I've played. Then again, I am a fan of the Buffy franchise, so I've probably got rose-coloured glasses on. Let me know if you've played this game, or if I've persuaded you to maybe consider having a look. I think it goes for between £30 and £40 at the minute, so it's not the cheapest in the world, but it is good fun. Now let's turn our attention to 2003's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Wrath of the Darkhul King on the Game Boy Advance. I'm using the DS Lite here just because it's got the backlit screen. I tend to prefer playing Game Boy Advance games on it anyway, so let's show it you with the best screen possible. The story again is told in between levels through screenshots from the series and text underneath. It's a decent system and it works. It's a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. There's quite a bit of platforming in the game, which you'll see. Again, you've got your punches, your kicks, and your weapons to choose from. Weapons are accessed through the start menu inventory. At this point in the video, you'll know what sort of things to find. Knives, stakes, crossbows. You also get some potions, things like holy water, and you do get some guns as well. I know guns are not something you would expect to see in a Buffy game, but this is set during the 4th season, where we met the Initiative. As with all the games, it's got its own original story. This time, we've got the Darkhul King, an ancient demon warlord, who ruled Earth for more than 500 years millennia ago, before being trapped in his own dimension. He's now employing demons on Earth to try and free him so he can take over once again. Thankfully, Buffy's not going to let that happen. At the end of each level, there's the customary boss fight to be had. That's what I would suggest you save your weapons up towards, and Riley does tend to actually appear and help out by chucking some health and weapons our way when needed. You've got your standard environmental puzzles like pressing switches, and the weapons are different in their effectiveness on each enemy. So stakes, for example, much more effective on vampires than other types. I do like these little touches, I think they do a really good job, and as you're about to see, dusting the vampires never gets old. Locations include temples, museums, a forest, obviously some sort of graveyardy place, and more. I do enjoy the variety with the enemies. I quite enjoyed the environmental puzzles. As I've already said, they're not particularly difficult, so they're not going to stop your progress, but it stops it just being a one-trick pony with nothing but beat-em-up mechanics. It keeps you engaged, and I like that. I like a bit of variety in my games. All in all, this is a really good, enjoyable game, And as with all of them, it's more Buffy stories. I am a big fan of the fact that all the stories on all these games are unique. They're their own thing. So it is there for us fans to get more from the franchise we like. And now we come on to 2000's Game Boy Color Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the reason I've done this portion of the video in reverse order, because I wanted to leave this game till last. I've only got the front lit Game Boy Advance SP, and as you can see, I've done my best. I've used filters and all sorts to try to capture the footage as best I can, but it's not great because it is only a front lit screen. That said, I hope it does do a good enough job of showing the game off to you. You get 8 side-scrolling beat-em-up levels. Generally, they're one-on-one fights with a vampire, and as you can see here, the easiest way to dispatch them, beat them down a little bit, sweep their legs and then roll over and give them a good old stake in the chest. It works for me, it's the way that I play through the game, and it doesn't get old either, because for a Game Boy Color I think the whole dusting mechanics work quite well, and it looks quite decent as well. It does look better in the flesh than it does through the camera. The game is set during Buffy the Vampire Slayer's 4th season, where Buffy and Willow are in Sunnydale College. Willow meets Tara, Xander meets the former vengeance demon Anya. Well, he met her in the 3rd season, but they become an item in the 4th season. Buffy meets Riley, we all meet the Initiative. It's a good stage of the series, as it does mark a change in Buffy from the high school girl to a bit more mature young lady. I'm saying that like a really old man. I'm actually younger than Sarah Michelle Gellar in real life. But anyway, you've got a good variety of levels, including the graveyard where we are. You get a mansion, Sunnydale Zoo, and some others. There are 6 varieties of vampires, plus 2 master vampires as bosses. The plot is progressed through cutscenes, as we've all come to expect, I'm sure now, exactly in the same way as before. It's more of a comic book art style than it is with the other games, just due to the 8-bit Game Boy Color's limitations, but it still looks good. And yeah, knocking vampires down, staking them and watching them turn to dust doesn't get old for me. The plot holds me as well. I'd definitely recommend it as a pickup to any Buffy fan, and it's nice and cheap too.
And that is all 5 Buffy the Vampire Slayer video games. I don't know if there's ever been any mobile games or not. I don't play mobile games, so you let me know if there have been any and if they're any good. What do you think? Have you played any of these games? Do you now want to? I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you've got the time. Be really interested to know, and as always, my sincere and utter thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to watch my little video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll be back with some more soon. If you want to tickle subscribe, don't fight the urge, and until next time, ta-da for now.